Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com, your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. The Off the Hook podcast at offthehooksports.com or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you go for your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Off the Hook with Dave Hooker starts now.
Is it exciting, titillating, scintillating? Probably not. It's Akron, but there's ways for Tennessee to get much better. He's Chris Landry. I'm Dave Hooker. This is Chalk Talk, brought to you by Craft Treats. Attached to this video, you can get a discount on the CBD pet treats that will make your pet and your wallet happy. So you need to do that. Again, Craft Treats. Hit that like and subscribe button as we're going to break down the Tennessee-Akron game purely from Tennessee's perspective. This is a game that Tennessee will win. But, Chris, if there's top of the list, what would you like to see Tennessee improve at based off their overtime win against Pitt last week?
The running game. I think the only way you get better with the running game is to run. You got to stay committed to it. Because we don't work in enough pads in the offseason and everything, you don't get better. Games are like practice. And I don't want to say this like in a disrespectful way to Akron or Ball State. You have to approach this game like practice or in lieu of practice. Because you're resistant to do this on pads. If you got pads on, you're playing in the game, run the football. I mean, you run it so that you can run it and feel good about running it when you have to run it against teams that you're going to need to have balance against. They could line up and do whatever they want to do against Akron and win it any way they want to win it. But I think what you have to do, and I said this prior to the Ball State game, you have to play through an opponent, meaning you respect them, but you don't have to focus on the game planning for Akron. You game plan with Akron in mind, but working on things that are going to be essential for you to win beyond Akron, but still allow you to have success with against Akron. So, in any aspects offensively is, to me, it's being able to run the football better, more consistently, getting the running backs confident, getting their timing in place. Now, again, having a whole bunch of yards as opposed to not doing it. Pitt, what's the difference? Well, Pitt's got a good defensive line, good defensive front, overall pretty good. Akron doesn't. So, and if they run for a bunch of yards, oh, that's great, it's better. No, it's just about repetition. It's about repetition. It's about repetition. And so I would focus on that. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't throw it a bunch. I mean, there are things to work in the passing game, timing-wise as well. So I think sharpening up on offensive line play as a whole, and the both pass and run game could need some work. Defensively, look, I think they're coming off a really good game. I think, creating more base pressure so that they can have help their safeties in coverage are things you want to focus on. That getting home with four-man pressures is what I would want to work on more on defense. I mean, if I have to bring a lot of blitz pressure against Akron, then I'm worried that I can't get home with four-man pressures. And if I have to bring blitz pressure against certain SEC teams, I don't want to have to do that against Will Levis of Kentucky or, Bryce Young of Alabama if I'm Tennessee, because that's going to get you exposed in the back end.
Yep. He's Chris Landry. Go to LandryFootball.com to learn more about football than you ever thought you could possibly know. It's that type of insight from a former coach and former scout, and it's absolutely incredible. So, Chris, as we look forward to this upcoming week with Tennessee, if I'm Tennessee fan, I'm happy with a convincing win, which is probably going to happen. But I'm also happy that if there aren't any monstrous game-changing mistakes. Now, I understand that you see mistakes that a lot of times a fan doesn't see. So I'm not talking about a misstep here on the offensive line or something like that. But as far as getting a punt blocked, which happened against Pitt, fumbling a punt return, which happened against Pitt, that stuff needs to stay in the Steel City and be done with.
Yeah, look, here's what I'm looking at in all aspects. Assignment, Assignment sound, effort, self-explanatory, execution. Okay, the result is going to be fine. That's the fourth thing. The result, you don't worry about that. The three things lead to the result. If you do those things well, it doesn't have to be in my opinion, it doesn't have to be the 30-point win or anything like that. It has to be, do they do things in those areas fundamentally sound, improve, like you said, clean up things on special teams, repetition, improve things in the run against, repetition. That all matters. That helps you. I think you can't waste an opportunity to get better. And this is an opportunity to get better and to go into an 0. And look, I mean, the big picture, the only thing fans want to talk about is the wins. Look, you get to going to go 3-0. And then, you've got a chance against a Florida and an LSU team that are working through some issues. And I know Florida had a big win, but, to me, I look at it as how much better you get in a game like this to get ready for a Florida and an LSU is probably the difference between being 4-1 or 5-0, or, I don't think that I God forbid 3-2 from Tennessee's viewpoint, but really this is important. And again, it's not about the margin of victory, but how you play, how much you get better in those areas. You get more confidence when you play better, Dave. And even if it's, it's not false confidence if you play against a weak opponent, but you start to get better. You start to see it. It's not about, your recognition skills. The fact that the guy you're going against is not nearly as talented as the guy you went against last week or the next 2 weeks or the rest of the season. It's about, I see it now. I recognize it quicker. It's a repetition. It's getting better, getting better, getting better. I mean, you think about this. You can do any show that you want. You can go on ESPN or you can go on any platform you want because your knowledge of knowing how to do it. You can go on be a guest on a little station with, nobody can hear you or where the whole world hears you. You'll still be the same because the repetition, the knowledge of how to do it is there. From a player standpoint, you're trying to get them to see it, recognize it, react to it, understand it, regardless of how good the opponent is or is not, because the ability to recognize and see it is half the battle. We all know that it's going to be a lot tougher to get the result against the better opponent. But if you can't recognize it and see it, you may get a result against a weak opponent, but you're going to get exposed against a better opponent. So this is why I think a game like this is more important than people think. But it's not about margin of victory. It's about assignment, effort, execution.
Now, and I want to ask about a possible coaching scenario that could have unfolded. And it would mean that Josh Heupel wouldn't have been at Tennessee, but there's a real possibility of that happening in a lot of different ways. We won't even bring up Greg Schiano's name, but there are a lot of different things that could have happened along the way. And one of those I find very interesting is here you have Scott Frost, who was fired at Nebraska. Scott Frost was at UCF. Very well could have gone to Florida, gets talked into going back to Nebraska. It didn't work out. And now he's fired in September. And I just wonder, had he gone there, I think I was told by people within Tennessee's program, they felt really good about getting Dan Mullen before Florida came calling, and Florida kind of shut the door on that. Now, I don't know if Dan Mullen pulls the trigger or not, but I was told they thought he would. Wow, we could be in a totally different world in terms of the coaches that we talk about. I know you're used to dealing with that all the time, but typically at Tennessee up until the past 12 years, there hasn't been a lot of change. And I just find that whole scenario very intriguing. How close was that to happening, you think?
Well, just remember this is kind of a little bit of a different time. You mentioned it's when Florida hired Dan. So it wasn't the most recent one, but it was obviously when Florida came open. He had been there under Urban, and there wasn't any doubt that of the two, he was going to go to Florida. The issue is if Florida had hired a Scott Frost, or you know who the Florida offered the job to first was Chip Kelly. Mm-hmm. Chip Kelly knowing Chip, Chip doesn't like to be in that spotlight. He loves being like in LA when nobody pays attention to him. He's all football all the time. He doesn't care about Gator boosters or Vols for life, or he doesn't care about that. He just doesn't. He's a football coach, and he's not doesn't embrace the whole, parts of what we normally associate with SEC football. So I think that they preferred Mullen over Scott Frost, and I don't know how that would have gone. But yeah, Dan Mullen was somebody that that Tennessee liked. But if Florida wasn't open, I don't know what Dan would have done. I think he would have taken it. I don't know. But at the time, remember, you got to remember the situation, not to confuse people. He's at Mississippi State.
Right.
And he's done a really good job, and he's happy there. Now I think he would have considered strongly Tennessee. Now, had he maybe looked into Tennessee and seen, some of the problems and done his homework or whatever, and maybe he might have been turned off by it and said, I'm going to stay at Mississippi State a little longer. Tennessee's great, but I don't know that the timing is right with everything they got going on. We don't know and we'll never know because Florida came open, and clearly of the two, that's one he liked. That was kind of not home for him, but it was quasi home because he had coached there. So yeah, you don't know. You don't know. And look, here's the thing. Here, Dan was great at developing a developmental program at Mississippi State, getting those right type of players that he could develop and do what he likes to do. And he was successful at it at Mississippi State. The thinking was he goes to Florida with all these resources. He's going to do that, and he's just going to get player after player after player just falling off the trees of all those bountiful, fruitful orchards in Florida with all these great players. You got to work at it. You got to get it. They don't come to you. You think anybody can recruit at Florida. No, not anybody can. And he didn't. And therefore, the expectation's a lot greater. So you can't have a mediocre season at Florida State. You can have them at Mississippi State, and they'll give you a pass. But you can't have them there.
Yeah.
I don't know about the fit at Tennessee. So we don't know. I mean, he would have probably coached the team well, but there would have been a ceiling in terms of, if he couldn't recruit well at Florida, kind of tough to think he would have done a better job at Tennessee recruiting. So it probably good fortune for them. As good of a hire as that would have been champion. Remember, great hire. Dan Mullen going to Florida. Everybody loved, would have been just as lauded in a positive sense by Tennessee. In retrospect, it probably wouldn't have worked out. We learn that all the time, don't we? Scott Frost going to Nebraska. What could be better? A kid coming home, and he's winning titles at UCF, and winning games at UCF and going 11-0, and boom, it's perfect. And it's just been an unmitigated disaster. Do you realize that at Nebraska, in the history of that lauded football program at Nebraska, their record when they scored 35 points or more at home was 274-0. They never lost a game in the history into the 1800s at Nebraska when they scored 35 points or more. That's exactly what happened this past week. Georgia Southern ran 700 yards of offense and could have, it was, the final straw in what was a disastrous tenure in what seemed like a perfect fit.
I thought it was a perfect fit. I did. I also thought Dan Mullen was a perfect fit at Florida. So I will hesitate before I use the term perfect fit again. Craft Treats, use this promo code, get the treats for your pet that will help them overcome some of that situational anxiety. And man, you're going to need it because the storms are always coming right around the road. You're going to want to take trips, and this will help your pet through those in the car ride anxiety. Also, with my pet, it helps with arthritis. My dog's getting a little bit older like me, and has a little bit more trouble jumping around. So that's
Hey, send some to Reveille at A&M. That collie needs some craft treats because he is just getting he's getting hammered there. I think their fans will be popping that. They well deserved. There's anxiety over there in College Station.
a loss so bad you kick your collie. He is Chris Landry. I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a production of Off the Hook Sports.